Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our In Conversation, and I am thrilled today to have the extraordinary Gabriela Tylesova here with us. We're not going to just talk about the Sleeping Beauty because Gabriela has such an amazing back catalogue of extraordinary shows. So I thought today what I really wanted to talk about, first of all, a little bit about how you became a designer, but also the way you do what you do, because it is an extraordinary thing. Every time you do a new show, it's like you completely start again. So how did you become this extraordinary designer? Where did it all begin?
But when I was a child, I used to draw all the time. And I mentioned it the other night. We had quite a Czechovian dysfunctional family. I grew up in former Czechoslovakia, which is now Czech Republic. And we used to go, you know, like lots of quarreling and quite crazy sort of, I don't know, spirits within the family. So I used to hide in the attic and I would be inventing stories and sketching them, drawing them in many, many journals, just illustrating and speaking out loud. And as I was drawing these stories, basically, and kind of loved the peace and quiet.
Do you have any of those pieces of paper somewhere?
They must be still in that attic room.
Oh, really? Oh my God!
It's a country house in a country, basically in Czech, which we used ourselves for, you know, going there for weekends or summer. Yeah, probably there. I never thought about it to dig them up.
So, did you then, when you went to school, sort of concentrate on drawing or painting, or?
I kept drawing, and then I started going. When I was like 6, I think the teachers picked up that I had, you know, talent with drawing. So I was going to another school after school for drawing.
Right.
And we did sculpture and fine art and all of that. And I was winning lots of competitions as a little child. But the problem was it was communist country. So getting into high school, my parents were very worried that if I go for art school, if I don't get in, there was no other option than you can do a train as a, you know, and they were just worried about that. So they enrolled me into like very technical, you know, college, really. It was very heavily based on science. There was no art at all.
Oh, wow.
And it became really hard from then on. I kept still drawing at home, but I wasn't really improving my skill as much as lots of other kids who went to art school. So when I finished, I wanted to do fine arts, and I went to the Academy of Fine Arts in Prague, and they would take maybe 6 students for the year, and I just had no chance to get in. And I was pig-headed. I didn't want to do anything else. So and my father said, "Well, you're not going to be at home, sitting at home. You need to, you know, you're not going to be." I don't know how you say it in English, you know, he had, you know, those ideas that you're not living off our money, basically.
Oh, yeah.
Go. Yeah, basically. So they were pretty harsh. So I just went and I went to Prague and I thought, well, I found a job, which was job in a theater, in a advertising section, because I could draw, and it was still the time when they were hand painting posters for shows. Yeah. Not like now, it's all done graphic design, you know, with just massive paintings and then the text. And I started doing that, which was just making money and still going in the evenings, going to live drawing classes and preparing for the next year's exam. And then I kind of fell in love with theater. So it was sort of an accident.
And I remember you saying you also used to make puppets. Was that in the same theatre or somewhere?
It was. I ended up working with 3 different puppet theatre companies. And puppetry is a big, it's got a large tradition in Czech Republic. So I ended up, you know, I love puppet theatre as well. It's not necessarily, here if you say puppet theatre, people think it's for children. But we had about 100 people staff in the company I worked for in Prague.
Wow, yeah. Well, because there's that very famous Black Theatre of Prague.
Yeah, as well.
Saw those puppets.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's many versions.
Yeah. Well, so one would think, you know, in this beautiful European city with all this culture happening, how did you end up coming to Australia?
Well, it's one of those classic stories. I met an Australian boy.
You came for love.
Yes, I did. Well, he said, you know, I suppose from working in these theatres, and I went to England, I lived in Germany. There were several years where I wasn't in Czech Republic. And then I came back, and by then I had a chance to get into the academy, but I met this Australian boy. And he said, well, come to Australia, you can study in Australia the same thing. and I came here, and by then I wanted to do like a set design, but there's a university in Prague when you can do experimental theater and puppetry.
Right.
So it's really specialized.
Yeah.
And there was no course like that in here. So NIDA was the closest place.
Yeah.
So I ended up applying to NIDA. And you know, NIDA is pretty tough to get in as well. I didn't know. I got in, but like Break and his family, they were celebrating. I couldn't believe it. I was going, well, it's, you know.
Of course.
So it was great. It was like six of us in the year, and you know, all from different backgrounds, 6 designers.
Yeah.
So I finished studying here basically.
Gosh, and I remember you. I mean, we met first of all when you'd finished NIDA and you'd done Sweeney Todd for the opera.
Yeah.
And I remember you came in and you showed me all these amazing designs from Sweeney Todd. And that must have been early 2000s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It would have been, yes.
Because I think I was just sort of fairly new as artistic director.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at these designs going, oh my God, they're so beautiful. Because these days, a lot of designers can't draw.
That is true. Yeah, that is true.
Yeah. and you so obviously your background of just constantly drawing, do you feel that was an advantage?
Definitely, and I keep saying I do master classes at NIDA when I've got time, which usually I don't, but I've done it this year and last year. I do like 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I keep drilling it into the kids, just keep drawing, because it's the quickest tool, you know, to really show your ideas.
Yeah.
Because if you explain something, everybody, and I've realized through the years that if you explain an idea, everybody's got a different version of it in their head.
They have to
until
see it.
you show them something,
Yeah.
and then they go, oh, I didn't think that was like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the first show that you did when you came out of NIDA? Do you remember?
I did an opera with Michael Scott Mitchell. Actually, Michael Scott Mitchell was one of the tutors.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if anybody knows Michael, but he's one of the, you know, very well-known Australian designers.
Yeah. He was the one that designed the torch for the
cauldron
Olympics.
for the Olympics, the Olympics 2000. But he's done, like,
I mean, he's done a lot of theatre, but
Ring
that's what
Cycle.
everyone knows him to.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That is true. And lots of large-scale events Michael designs, but lots of opera. I don't think he's ever done ballet.
No. Oh, yes, he did one.
Ah.
Yeah, he did a piece with Adrian Burnett, and it was just the set. He didn't do the costumes.
Yeah, he doesn't do the
Yeah,
costumes.
and it was monumental. It was
Yes,
like he's...
Michael,
yeah.
yeah. Well, Michael did architecture. Lots of designers come from different backgrounds. So
you worked with him. Were you doing costume and he did set? Or?
Yes, he asked me straight out of NIDA. It was the first year to do costumes for Elixir of Love, which is Donizetti opera. For Opera Australia, which was a big, you know, thing. I was so excited. Because if I was in Europe, you don't get those kind of offers at really young age. You are like associate designer and working with 50, 60-year-old designers who are established. There's a hierarchy how you get there.
Yeah.
But this is something about Australia, you know, that the land of opportunity. Like, you know,
I think at that time what was really interesting too is Moffat Oxenbould was the director of the Opera Australia, and he had a very close connection with NIDA.
He did.
I mean, you know, he bought... I mean, I think we have a lot to thank Moffat for, because, I mean, you know, I think he gave Baz Luhrmann one of his early opportunities. You know, he was very open to giving people...
nurturing new artists.
Yeah.
Moffat used to come to, because NIDA, they do presentations, like they have presentations of work they're working on, and Moffat used to come with few people from the opera and just literally see the new talent who was coming out. And he was giving, I remember Peter England and Russell Cohen, they got both Madama Butterfly, which Moffat basically picked them up, and they worked on that show for a few years to develop it. And it's still on, I think it was in this theatre.
It was just before us, yeah.
That's Peter's, you know,
Wow.
that show's been running for, I don't know, 20 years.
Yeah. So, obviously, I mean, you know, you've done a lot of designing for theatre, but that's not all you do. You have this broad canvas of creativity. So, did you at one point sort of go, oh, well, I feel like I've done this enough? Or was it just other things drawing you? Yeah,
I do have that sometimes, because I used to love as well, like a landscape architecture, and I always thought maybe that's one, you know, so who knows? And I've got a big property. I've got a big property in the country in Czech, South Bohemia, so I kind of go crazy there planting, not just, you know, I'm planting like orchards or what do you call those walkways? When you have the walkways through the land and then you have the trees around it.
Oh yeah, like
Those, like
yeah.
it's quite grand.
Oh my gosh.
But I love it. I just got gumboots and tracksuit on, and just be whole day outside and planting like 15 trees or something.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so that's completely different to, I don't know, but it's still a visual thing, I suppose.
And
Yeah,
you
like,
also do wallpaper? You design wallpaper?
I have, but that hasn't completely taken off because it's partly I was kind of hoping I can find a business partner to work with me. And the 2 people I had, it just didn't work out. And I think I will probably need to do it myself.
Right. But you also were designing some, when we were doing Sleeping Beauty, you were designing some beautiful ceramics as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's all part of that was part of
the whole thing.
The whole idea, which I will need to do, basically. That's still waiting to happen.
But tell me about, because, I mean, we worked together twice. The first time was Scheherazade that we did in 2006. And because I remember literally seeing your portfolio, and then I went and saw when you did the Cyrano de
Cyrano,
Bergerac, in Melbourne.
David.
And and I remember thinking, oh my God, this woman should do a ballet. Because I think what I loved about Cyrano was that it was so period and yet so not, like it was so today, it was so modern, it was so everything that was fresh, but you really felt like you were in that sort of Cyrano time.
World. Maybe that's, you know what, it's funny you're mentioning it, because there are lots of designers who are probably, I don't know how to, like lots of designers really go for the period. And they're really like loving and honoring to do exactly what the period was like. But because I was originally much more into fine arts to be a sculptor and painter. So I don't see myself really as a costume designer in a funny way. So I always think, well, I just go from who is the character, what's gonna work, look at different references and look at fashion, and don't necessarily just am that strict about how it's created, that you've got the right petticoats and the right shape. So I find it more interesting that you come up with like it's almost like a sculpture, which fits human body.
Because I remember, because working with a designer, like you, that has that incredible vision, it is almost like you become like the dramaturg for the show too, because that's what happened. I know when we did Scheherazade, because there was a whole lot of ideas that you brought to that production that we hadn't done before. We had this wonderful, very sort of sleek, it was sort of like just a little nook, and behind it there was this beautiful cloth that was all intricately cut out. And your idea, which was, I thought was so amazing, it was like, you were one of those Arabian women looking through your little sort of burqa, and then behind that there was this incredible world. And
that's
I mean, that to me was just such an interesting way into that story, because we had a 5-minute overture.
That's right, which you think the people need to look at something. And get something happening in their head, but like trigger some thought. But maybe that comes from the interest in the storytelling, and creating stories as well, which comes from the childhood. But I think we all have that in us. It's just if you nurture it. And the ideas, because my sister is really talented, but she's never nurtured that. So she goes, I couldn't come up with that. And I keep saying, yes, you could, but you just need to practice.
Yeah. And I guess you need to be able to, what I find so fascinating too is that you don't just have one idea, you have like 15 ideas, and then we choose the one that we like the best.
Yeah. I've got too many ideas. Too expensive ideas.
It must be fascinating. When you start thinking about a new show, what comes first? Is it a visual thing, or is it I suppose it might be different for every show that you do.
It depends. It depends. If it is let's say it's a ballet, you listen to the score, and you get the music it's all in the music really, as well. So, or there's some kind of like a gut feeling, or you get that first intuition what it should be about, and you follow that, and you're sort of true to that.
And do you have to, every time you start a new show, sort of like erase everything that you've done before?
Not necessarily. In fact, I sometimes find it fun that there is an essence, like for example, I'm designing Muriel's wedding, and which is opening tonight.
It's opening tonight. We're
I'm
very
going
lucky
straight.
to have Gabriela
I'm going
here.
straight after here. I'm going there. But you know, we've got there's a little homage which probably nobody will get except myself. But there's a little homage to like Love Never Dies, which you know we've got we've got these 4 girls which are on the island cruise, and they've got these ridiculous, like a show dresses. But there's a little bit of the show dancing girls from Love Never Dies, even though Muriel's wedding should look kind of more pedestrian and, you know, like it's modern show.
Yeah.
But like you do, you know, I do get inspired, or I sort of, you know, there's the odd thing I put in.
So I'm going to be looking for the Sleeping Beauty reference in your next show.
Yeah.
And because what's so fantastic about, I mean, working on this production, I mean, actually, Scheherazade was such a beautiful show. And when we talked about it initially, I remember saying to you, you know, the first time that Scheherazade was done, people walked away because it was such a different style of production. Right. It was so, like, you know, people had never used those colours altogether, and it was, you know, it had such an impact that people went home and changed all of their furniture, and all of a sudden put cushions around the floor and had big sort of hanging urns, and you know, it was like it had a huge profound. People started wearing sort of these, you know, harem pants.
Harem pants,
and scarves. You know, it really impacted French fashion, and so it was a, you know, really important thing. And I remember saying to you that famous line Diaghilev said, "Astonish me," and so that was the brief, and you did it. I mean, we had those incredible costumes, and I still remember the bald-headed guys with the little fez hats with the pom-poms on a wire. That were just, I mean, was that sort of? How did you find that Moroccan influence? That sort of.
I don't know. Well, I've done the research. I've researched, but then I just start sketching, and it sort of comes up somehow. You sort of channel it, I suppose. I don't know. It just comes up. Like you do a few sketches, and you know, there it is. Sometimes.
And because I mean, I guess as a designer, do you build relationships with certain people? Like,
oh yes,
I mean, because you and Simon Phillips have had a long history together.
Yeah, with Simon, we sort of on a. Well, you know, it works when you find like a creative relationship and it works. You wanna do it again because it's easy and you enjoy. Well, it's never easy doing a new show.
No.
So that's the whole thing. So you don't want to spend time with somebody who is really difficult.
Yeah.
And because it could be a hell, turn up in a hell. So Simon, like, you know, I've really enjoyed working with you. That was really great.
Me too. Me too.
We had a great time.
Because. Like you say, it is a huge commitment. Like, you know, you would have started Muriel's wedding probably, what, a couple of years ago?
Yeah, a year and a half ago.
Yeah. And that's a big investment of time with someone if you don't get on.
That's right. And you don't produce very good work either if you don't get on. Because it sort of reflects in the energy in a way, subliminally, but as well visually. What actually comes out doesn't necessarily work that well.
Do you remember the first show you did with Simon?
Yes, it was in the what was I? No, it was the first show. Was the show which I spoke about with Michael Scott Mitchell doing Elixir of Love.
Oh right, and
because Michael used to work with Simon all the time. So
right,
yeah.
And then you came along.
I remember I flew to Melbourne to meet Simon. He was directing. I think it was I don't know if it was Hamlet. It was a Shakespeare. And we were in the art center, and he just had a coffee break, and I was in the foyer with my folio, and I was straight out of school, and I just showed him a few drawings. He said, "Oh yeah, good, that will do." And then he went home. That was it. I was like,
and you know, there's been such an amazing array of shows with.
That's right.
With
I don't know how many shows we did, but many.
From you know, straight theatre to
musicals,
to musicals.
Yeah.
Actually, I think the only thing that Simon hasn't done is a ballet.
Simon wants to do a ballet.
Oh really?
Yeah.
There we go.
He does.
Oh, we need to get him to do a ballet.
He keeps saying, you know, he's got so many ideas, but he thinks he will never get one because people will be worried about the choreography, that he's not a choreographer.
Yeah, I think.
But, you know, or he could work with someone. You know, like,
totally. Because I think some of the really. I mean, Zeffirelli's done ballets.
Right.
And I mean, even George Ogilvy's Coppelia, I think, had a huge influence on that production.
Right.
Because he directed it, but Dan Peggy Van Prague did all the choreography, and it works beautifully.
Yeah.
I think it's.
So he's got he's got a chance.
So yeah.
I'll tell him tonight.
I need to ring Simon.
I'll tell him.
Yeah. We're going to do a ballet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess to talk about Sleeping Beauty, because that is the show that... It's
That's
a shame
right.
that we're not actually looking at Gabriela's
Yeah.
beautiful design. It's just there behind the curtain. Has everyone seen it? Yeah. Yeah. You're seeing it tonight? Oh, good. And have you seen... Well, we'll talk about that later. But I've got to say, when I was contemplating doing this, the only designer that I wanted to work with was Gabriela. And I thought there's absolutely no way that she's going to have time because, I mean, you do a lot of, you're
right.
very high in demand.
Yeah.
So we met on the 26th of November in 2013 and had coffee, and I sort of said, I'm going to do this production. I'd really love you to do it. And you said yes.
That's right. And it was your birthday.
It was my 50th birthday. And
David
I didn't...
said this is the best present.
It was actually, I didn't want to emotionally blackmail you into...
No.
I didn't tell Gabriela
me
until after she said yes. But because I really had this idea that this production needed to be very beautiful, obviously, but it also needed to have life. It needed to have a place that wasn't too crammed into, you needed to look at it and go, I feel like I know where I am, but this is a completely new vision of this. And it was really weird from the very beginning. It was like you understood that and then made everything better than I thought it could be. So what did you just sort of, I don't know, how did that happen? Because...
But there was a process, because you remember we were talking about the columns or somehow the architecture of the place, and you were kind of, your vision was that the palace doesn't change, and then the land comes, and the forest comes in and all of that. So I was looking at the architecture, and I started with straight columns and putting them. And then we had that meeting. And I was showing you what I was doing, and that I'm not happy with it. That it looks boring, and like we need to do something more. It's a fairy tale. So that's why I started twisting the columns, so they look more like they're moving, or they look like legs, or you know, they're kind of alive.
And what's so beautiful is that they come down to that tiny point, a bit like a dance.
Like a dance point shoe, yeah.
And it defies the gravity because, there's these beautiful ornate columns that just come down to this tiny little point.
Yeah.
And it was, but even the costumes, I mean, like, because we talked about Baroque, because I just sort of felt that it needed to have that really sort of very big,
feel luxurious, decorative, elemental,
expensive.
That's right. Yeah.
And then the fairy costumes too. I mean, they were. I mean, they were one of the first things I think that you showed me in the costume.
Yes. World. Yeah. That's right. Well, because there's the fairies. There's lilac fairies. So I started with lilac, I think. And it's based on the flowers. So I was going, okay, so instead of doing normal tutu and you put flowers on top, I was going, let's make them like, again, it's probably the sculpture idea that you create actually, the skirt is made out of millions of petals. So it's sort of the architecture of the whole piece becomes a flower.
And you'd never designed a tutu before,
no,
have you?
That was the first time.
Can you believe that? They're the most beautiful tutus ever, and it was your first time.
Yeah, I keep getting, every day I get emails from people from around the world. Like I got one today again. There's like students from colleges who are heavily into ballet, and they want to do Lilac Fairy. They're doing it as their final year project, and they keep asking, how did we end up doing it?
How did you make
can
it?
they do copy of the costume? It's amazing.
It is so beautiful.
And maybe that's partly because I didn't come. I just thought, well, let's. When you have a fresh start, like carte blanche, like you haven't done it before. You've got more chance to come up with something.
The other thing that was really funny is that I sent Gabriela all of the things that I didn't want it to look like.
Yeah, that's true. That was the list. That was the folder of not.
I kept on going onto the internet and finding all of these really ugly pictures of really nasty sleeping beauties, and I was like going, don't want it to look like that. Don't want it to look like that. It was hard to sometimes explain what I wanted it to look like, but I was very clear about
what you didn't
nothing
want.
shiny or and not too pink.
Yeah,
And
but it was helpful. It was helpful.
But
know.
and then the other thing that was really beautiful is we talked about in Act One it being all about the rose because the rose adage, you know, and the tutus, like the girlfriend's tutus, are all almost like these beautiful big, you know, those big open roses. They're just like the petals on the top of the skirt, and then even Aurora has that same sort of thing. There's like petals around her skirt, and then in the garland dance, of course, there's roses all over the costumes and those beautiful garlands. That was the thing I said, we've got to have pretty garlands. We can't have ugly garlands. You know, those sort of things with like a flower like that.
Yeah.
So they have to be really big and beautiful. And yeah, you totally did that. And then we talked about what the men would wear. And Gabriela designed this costume and she showed it to me and I went, oh my God, they look like the stems of the roses because they had these wonderful like thorny points. And you probably, I mean, you know, you see it, you'll see it when you see the production again. But all of the boys have these beautiful collars that come to like points, like thorns, and on their cuffs, they have these sort of pointed cuffs.
Yeah.
And all those beautiful details that are just...
But I think you actually talked about the boys' green and stems before I did even the drawing.
Oh, right.
You did. I think you did. So it was kind of like...
We can make them like
it was
stems.
like your idea. I think it was. Because we're going with the color, you know, we were saying maybe the boys are green and the girls have the pink in them.
Yeah. Because, and I did want them to sort of look like a big bunch of flowers. And they do.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I mean, it's hard to say what, but I think the beginning of Act One with the garland dance is some of the most beautiful imagery in the show. And then, of course, the other amazing sort of coup de theatre is at the beginning of Act Three with those gorgeous chandeliers.
Yeah.
And
the white and cream and gold costumes. But I think the Rose d'Arche is probably, to me, in my whole life, that's probably the most enjoyable visually.
Oh, really?
You know, costume-wise, I really love it.
And you know what's so beautiful is that the whole stage actually relates to each other.
Yes.
Do you think about that when you're designing?
Yes.
Yeah. Because the color palette is like perfect.
That's why I love doing set and costume design, because you've got it under control. And when you have the scenic artist painting, I come often with I know it in my head, the colors, but sometimes I can come up with the costume and just make sure we've got the same colors happening on the set, because otherwise it doesn't work.
And I love that also about the nymph scene too, because I remember we talked about the nymphs almost as if they've come out of the forest, like as if they're part of the scenery. And they are exactly the same costumes and just the colour palette, everything. It's so beautiful. And the wings, we talked a lot about the wings, didn't we?
We did. We did lots of versions. We did versions of the wings to make them right. And that's partly like the ballet is actually really well set up, the costume department. So, and with some fantastic people working there. So Lynn Monroe did wings. And she did great prototypes. So David could try them and work out. I think we ended up a bit smaller than what we did. We had a bigger version, and they were too floppy.
But what's so beautiful is when the girls bourrée around in circles, the wings flutter. And it's just those tiny little things. We were talking before about it's the detail that makes something magnificent. And in a big show like this, you know, it doesn't just happen. It's,
you wish you did.
I've got to tell a bit of a story about the lead up into. We had a week pretty much in the theatre before the premiere.
Yes.
And some of the third act costumes were probably the last ones to be made.
Yeah.
And Gabriela had, done these,
army of people.
An army of people. These huge, beautiful designs. And I think the first day on stage, which was the first full run we did, was like the Friday, and we opened on the Tuesday, and we had all the costumes for the prologue and Act 1 and Act 2, and then we got to Act 3, and they were sort of like plain cream dresses.
I know.
With no decoration and no nothing and no hats.
No.
And you said, don't worry, it'll be fine. And over the weekend, all of a sudden, that's what happened.
Yeah.
You mustn't have slept, I don't think.
Well, we were in a red zone, It
was like
so
danger,
we had volunteers, we had I don't know, like table of maybe 15, 20 volunteers, old ladies, really happy coming in and sewing flowers on and decorations. And then we contacted all colleges, fashion colleges, and art schools, and so we had like army of people
Yeah.
to pull it together for the last few days, or maybe it was last week.
So all the trim went on, and
All of it went on.
So that
there,
was
like, we were,
that was there. I think for the Monday night, we had all of the trim, so it was beautiful. And then Gabriela was like, "It's still not finished. It's still not finished," because there had to be art finishing, and I never knew what art finishing was until Sleeping Beauty. But you'll notice in all the costumes, there's a whole lot of like
shading,
yeah,
Yeah.
and so that it makes the waist thinner,
smaller,
and it
right.
also sort of brings out the jewels, and
That's right.
and we ended up breaking the air.
We ended up the air
spray-
gun,
the
yeah,
air
the
gun.
spray gun got broken.
Got broken because there was so much art finishing
That's
going
right.
on.
Airbrush, yeah.
Airbrushing, yeah.
Yeah.
And-
They had to get new one. we had everything was collapsing because the workload was immense. And then I think we were almost done with all these, and then all the final costumes, which was the finale. And then they were supposed to be wearing these masks, and the masks were happening really late. So I actually
Yeah.
did like few nights before opening, I stayed the whole night on my own because I ended up painting them by hand. And then, I don't know, it was like 3 a.m. and I was thinking, what if I paint the other side? Because it would be fun if the face is on both sides.
Yeah.
So when they walk around, you can see that. And I thought, oh, well, I'll just stay whole night and I'll finish it. So I did. I think I finished, it was like 6:30 in the morning, it was sun coming up, and I was done. I photographed them all, and that was it. It was mad.
And the other thing that you should know too, because I mean, Gabriela's not one of those designers that just goes, yes, 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 and walks out of the room. When Lynn Munro, who did, she does all of
She did
the masks and
for the
things.
hats.
And I mean, Gabriela made a little man, maquette?
Like a maquette, yeah.
And this beautiful maquette. And then Lynn turned it into the life size. But they arrived and they were just white. And then you hand painted every single one of them.
But that's from the puppetry, because I used to, and it's, if you design puppets, the designer always paints the face, or usually paints the face.
Ah, right.
It's a thing, because you almost give it life.
Yeah.
So I love doing it. So actually, I did all the rats, all the facing.
And they're all different.
Yeah.
They're all different. Each
Yeah.
rat is completely different.
Yeah.
They're so beautiful. So I've got to say that, it's so wonderful to have the opportunity of working with someone like Gabriela, because I was told once you should always work with people that make you better, and that's exactly what happened in this production. What's it like when you start on a big production like this? Do you see the final product, or do you just methodically work through it?
Yeah, I do start seeing it, I suppose. We have meetings with the director or choreographer. So, you kind of get it literally at the beginning. You get the sense what, because usually I get approached. Mm-hmm. It's different, I suppose. Yeah. So I had a vision of what it might be, and then it gets clearer and clearer.
Yeah. And you do these amazing sort of sketches on big pieces of paper with just pencil to start off with. Is that the first sort of incarnation? Yeah,
I do sketches of ideas, or sometimes I go straight in the model and I start putting objects in there or sculpting the space.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow. To get the, like some, I mentioned Michael Scott Mitchell before, but because he's an architect, he actually starts drawing it. He does like drafting.
Oh, right. Like a proper...
But I need to do the three-dimensional, like I'm more like a sculptor.
Yeah.
That same idea.
Yeah.
That I need to see it physically and touch it with my hands, the set. Mm. And once I've got the setting, then the costumes, that comes next. The characters need to live in that space. Mm. So, it's quite a different process. I think everybody's got a different process.
And what's really interesting too is like Muriel's wedding that you've just done is modern. Mm. Is that harder or easier, or is it just...
It's not... I mean, it's similar. It's just like I much more prefer doing, massive period shows because it's much more elaborate. It's beautiful. I mean, Muriel's wedding is beautiful in its own way, but it's not as... It's certainly like I would prefer working on a show like this.
Yeah. And of course, Love Never Dies, which is also an amazing theatrical world, Coney Island. It sort of had that incredible imagination.
Yeah, which was as well in this theater years ago. Yeah, that's right. The period shows, and which you can, and they're kind of stretched. You can stretch your imagination. It's sort of fairy tale.
So,
gone.
what's on your drawing board at the moment? What's happening? Is have you got 3 shows all sort of in your brain at the moment?
Yeah, there's few shows in my brain. I can't talk about one
No.
because they are it's all top secret at the
Yeah,
moment.
no,
Yeah.
it's just that I guess what I was getting at is that you don't just do one show at a
No,
time.
no, it's always
You've always
few.
got
Yeah.
a whole lot of things.
That's
And how
right.
do you manage that?
You just have to be good at managing your time, and I don't know. I sort of keep the studio quite clean. It gets to times when it's a complete mess, but then I clean it up to be, so you get clarity in your head as well. Sometimes I go through madness. I clean the whole house just to clear my head.
Get rid of all those old shows
yeah.
and start again.
Yeah, totally.
Is there a production or an opera or a play or a ballet that you sort of think I'd really love to do that you haven't sort of approached yet?
I used to want to do Bluebeard's Castle, which is quite a dark opera, which is this man who drags these women to his palace, and basically they can't enter one of the doors, and the girl enters it, and there's these dead wives of his. It's really like psychological. Horrible thing, but I was always thinking I was drawn to that.
Yeah.
There's Rusalka, which is another opera, which is
where she can't sing.
Yeah.
But
it's a beautiful opera by Dvořák. Yeah.
Who wrote the Bluebeard's Castle?
I think it's Maya Beard. I think it is Maya Beard.
Ah, wow.
Yeah.
So we need to talk to Lyndon and get him to schedule some of these things.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, you've done now A Sleeping Beauty. There's only 2 other Tchaikovsky ballets.
That's right.
And both of them, I think, would be amazing. I think you'd do the most extraordinary Swan Lake, and I think you'd do the most amazing Nutcracker.
Yeah, I would love to do Nutcracker. Both, actually.
Yeah.
Always wanted to do Nutcracker for Christmas, that whole... Yeah, I just love it. Love it, especially in Europe, because it's snowing, and that's what you do in winter. You go see Nutcracker.
And that would actually really bring together, I mean, once again, all of your talent, because, there's so many puppetry things in Nutcracker that could be amazing. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and Swan Lake is just... Yeah, what do you say?
Well, the music of Swan Lake, I think, is the thing that's just so extraordinary.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say how lucky we are to have someone like Gabriela in Australia. And I think Czech Republic's loss, well, not that it's their loss, because you spend a lot of time there and you do great work there too. But I think how lucky that we are that Australian guy went to Czech Republic and met you, because you have enlivened our cultural world in Australia. I think you have given us such an inspiration in every single show. I'm in my mind, I'm thinking of, like the Rabbits, and I mean, I still have such vivid memories of Love Never Dies and Cyrano de Bergerac, and you did that fantastic
Rosencrantz and
Guildenstern. I don't think there's any art form in Australia that hasn't been touched by your hand, and so we are so lucky to have this woman in our midst, and may there be many more exciting ballets as well as operas and musicals and theatre that we have Gabriela with us for. So thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you.